Welcome back, YouTubers. Hope everyone's having a good July. It's July 2019. It's really hot. It's one of those mad dogs and Englishmen type of days. You don't want to be outside midday. Too hot for fishing, midday for sure. So I'm going to show you how to tie one of my favorite flies. It's actually it's a Hex Nymph pattern that I started fishing for Steelhead. It's one of my favorite Steelhead flies, and this is primarily a Midwest Michigan type Steelhead fishing fly that I'm talking about. Nymphs of the Hexagenia limbata are a major protein source in most of our rivers here. The trout feed heavily on them. The Steelhead, whether or not they're feeding heavily, definitely hit them when they're in the river to spawn, or even over the winter when they're holding, getting ready to spawn. So it's a great fly. It's my own pattern. It kind of is going along with my series here of flies that are super fast, super easy, and super effective. It's an impressionistic fly. It's not highly detailed and accurate to what a hex fly actually looks like, but it has a lot of the qualities and colors and shapes and sizes of a hex nymph. So I'm starting off. I've got a Daiichi 1530 wet fly hook. It's a size 6. It's 2 extra strong heavy wire, 1 extra short. Got 8/0 thread. I'm going to start off with some pheasant tail fiber. Cut a section out. You want the tail to be fairly long because the hex nymph is actually kind of a long, skinny nymph. So I'm going to leave that sticking out quite a ways. Start your thread, mid shaft, tie back to the bend. Long, flowing, undulating tail. This fly, in a couple different places, uses brown speckled hen saddle fibers. I use this for a lot of flies. It's a really great buggy looking feather. You want to pull a longish feather off the edge, off the side of this saddle patch, and you use 2 parts of the feather. The first part you use actually is typically a leftover from the fly that you tied before. So I'm going to start with a fresh feather, but that's the feather. For this first section here, I'm actually going to use just a section of that feather, and that's the section right there. It's the soft phyllo plume type section, and tying this in is going to replicate the feathery gills that are on the side of a Hexagenia nymph. So it's, again, pretty simple, not highly critical how you do it. I just lay it flat on top, lock it in, and leave that hanging back. Next step, again, this is a super simple fly. I'm going to take that same feather, but I'm going to use the whole feather now. I'm going to tie it in tip first. So I'm going to fold back most of that feather until you get it like that. Then I'm going to tie that in tip first. We're going to palmer that forward over the body material. So that's tied in. You can trim that off or just lash that all down quickly. Next step, peacock herl. I love to use peacock herl wherever possible. That iridescent that peacock herl has is just a great attractant. Fish seem to love it. I think it looks great on any fly you tie it on. So I'm going to grab about a dozen fibers. Make sure they're nice and straight. And I want to tie these in tip first because I'm going to tie it in backwards and fold it over as kind of a wing case or back on this fly. So you can get them kind of evened up and then trim it because you're going to tie it in. But you want to have nice, thick peacock herl fibers. And again, you can tie this in mid body. It's okay if you bulk it up right there, because you're going to end up wanting to create a little bit of bulk right there. So I'm going to tie those in, leave them hanging back. Next step, very simple, pale yellow yarn. Now, this is the Hex Nymph version of this fly, so pale yellow to bright yellow or even chartreuse sometimes, if you're going to be fishing muddy water, is the way I go. Simple, just poly yarn you get from a craft store or any fly shop. Simple stuff. Tie it in at the front, wind back over it. Now, as I said, this is a hex version of this fly. Because this fly is such a impressionistic fly, and like other impressionistic flies, I think one of the keys to why it's so effective is because it represents a lot of different things that are going to be present in a trout stream that fish see on a daily basis. And over time, I started using this fly more and more often. I started tying it on a lighter wire hook to use as an emerger pattern in the summertime hex hatch. That works really well as an emerger. So I put the yellow yarn down. I'm going to palmer this soft hackle forward. Just kind of fold it back a little bit to keep the legs from getting trapped. It's okay if you run into some of the soft phyllo plume at the base. That's just going to create more movement. I'm going to loosely palmer that forward. So to go back to what I was saying, I started using this fly more and more in the summer. I developed it for that winter-spring steelhead fishery. But I started to use it more in the summer, sometimes as an emerger, and then sometimes just to fish wet, just the way you do in the summertime, or I'm sorry, in the springtime. One of the things that you notice in the springtime when you're steelhead fishing is that you catch a hell of a lot of brown trout on this fly, and for whatever reason they like it. So in the summertime, sometimes it'd be my go-to fly, and it started to work really well. And I started to get the idea that because it was an impressionistic fly, there were other things that the trout were taking it for. I think because it's got this dark back and kind of feathery body that moves pretty well, it could be mistaken for a lot of things. I think it could be mistaken for a minnow, possibly. I really think it can be mistaken for a small crayfish, possibly even a stonefly nymph. But I think crayfish is a big possibility. It's swimming backwards. You've got antenna, claws, legs, and a crayfish back, possibly. Again, it's a fantastic impressionistic hex nymph, but crayfish might be on the agenda. So I tie this fly in different body colors from time to time. I will tie it with a rust yarn or dubbing. You can use dubbing or yarn. I tie it black sometimes. I tie it more of an olive sparkle color sometimes. So it's, again, an impressionistic fly that you can vary slightly in body color. I think overall you want to keep the long pheasant tail fiber, the phyllo plume base from that speckled hen saddle, this section here, and I think you want to use the brown speckled saddle feather to wind forward. Tip first, wound forward over the body with the peacock herl over the back. It's a relatively durable fly, even though peacock herl is not especially durable. It seems to hold up pretty well. Again, if you watch any of my other videos, I want the flies that I fish with to be effective, number one, easy to tie, number two, and relatively durable. I think durability is the lower priority out of effectiveness and easy to tie, because going just back to the steelhead fishing, you tend to lose a lot of flies because you fish pretty snaggy water. So a fly that you can tie really quickly is a good one. This fly is called Brandon's Genie, and I just refer to it as a Genie Fly, which is kind of a riff on a Hex Nymph. That's what it started off as, a Hex Nymph wet fly, and it's super effective. And I hope you try it out. I hope you catch a lot of fish on it. I think it's got potential to work anywhere. When guiding in Alaska one year, I had a box full of these in my gear, and ended up fishing them just for the hell of it. I don't know that I was replicating anything in the Alaskan waters that I was fishing, but caught tons and tons of trout, dolly varden, silver salmon, just grayling. So whatever reason, it's a great buggy looking fly, and it's really effective. And there it is. That's the Genie Fly. I hope you try it out, and good luck on the water. Talk to you next time.